just to kind of kick it off too, and what Sahara was talking about as well, is part of this is going to be training. Part of this is also going to be some awareness, some just informational information as we are trying to finalize the digital delivery and CAD manual to get that out here late summer. Hopefully get that in your guys' hands, but really also kind of giving an awareness of what that is, the information behind it, and how these trainings are based and how we move forward. But before I start with that, I would like to have Katie and Lindsay introduce themselves to the group and kind of what they're going to be going over from just a high level standpoint. So Katie.
Hi, good morning. I'm Katie Beardsley. I'm one of HDR's roadway engineers. Today I'll be going over kind of an example project using the full template method at a pretty high level for a diverging diamond interchange.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. Lindsay?
Good morning. I'm Lindsay Rindle. I'm also part of HDR's roadway group. I am going to be going over the backbone method and showing my template and model for US 24 reconstruction and widening, which is down in Colorado Springs.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay.
Perfect. And maybe some item type stuff too, she might help out with as well.
Our CDOT item type is broken.
But we're getting there. We're getting things going.
Get it going.
And I think many of you know me, past training, some other things as well. Jeremy Kopp with HDR, the digital delivery manager for the Colorado area. As many of you I've worked with, my main background is roadway, so kind of puts me into this realm as well. So again, welcome all, and really wanted to kind of start this off with the roadway design and modeling expectations. As both Katie and Lindsay mentioned, a couple of different methods that they're going to be using. These aren't the only methods, but these are the main methods that we cover within, sorry, I thought I had that up. There we go. Within the manual itself, also a lot of industry, and also just attending through Bentley Premier and doing a lot of that information through Bentley. So real high level, a couple of those things that we were talking about, and Lindsay had mentioned that she was going to be using the backbone method, and from a high level, what that is that's really what this looks like, of using basically your main line and then your end conditions in as separate components. Can be in separate files, can be in the same file, but as separate components, versus what Katie had mentioned is one full template, which is what most people are aware of and used to, of having everything in one template. And a lot of the CDOT templates that are already there and already developed are a full template, but we've been finding different things that come out of the backbone method that might help from a user perspective, as far as processing crashes and different things like that. But Lindsay and Katie will go over more of those things as we get into that. So as far as some of those modeling expectations, that's really what wanted to kind of cover some of that. Again, also they'll get into their templates, what those look like. They'll also get into the point names and those items. The biggest thing about it is keeping clean templates. So then that way you have a clean corridor, which helps keep a clean file. And you'll see in, as the manual comes out in chapter 2, which is the document management chapter of the manual itself, talks a lot about federating files, container files, keeping files clean, and reasons for that and why we would do that. So this page that you see here is in chapter 4. There's a lot of information in chapter 4. We talk a lot about level of development and level of information need. some of those things. We won't dive into that today, but those are some of the things to just kind of be aware of what's coming and what that means. And as we get into item types through the meeting itself, we'll start to talk a little bit more about what that information is, how that's brought forth and move forward. So with that, I think I will turn that over to Lindsay now. So Lindsay, if you're ready, I'll let you share screen for for going over the backbone method. Not sure if her computer went haywire or not. Lindsay, are you there? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jeremy.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's all good.
Good.
We can wait a little bit. We're all used
Well-
to technical difficulties at this time. At this
Yeah,
point.
that's what I'm wondering. But Katie, do you if you want to show yours, I think that's fine too. We can go to the full template method first.
Sure.
So I'll stop sharing screen. There you go.
Okay. You're seeing my ORD?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so this project recently went into 30% design in April. This is the Spear and 23rd project here in Denver over I-25. So this project has over 10 different corridors that are all tied together, and they're all talking to each other. And today, like I mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on the diverging diamond interchange at Spear Boulevard and how we use point controls to help tie these together, and also parametric constraints to change which end conditions we want to use. As Jeremy kind of touched on, I'll be doing the full template method. So my templates have the full pavement section, and also included in the same templates are all of the end conditions. So we just use null point switches to turn those end conditions on and off. So let's go here. So in this file, I've already got my alignments referenced in. So these are the horizontal alignments and also have their profile data associated with them. I've already done a pretty basic corridor model for the eastbound direction. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a westbound corridor, and then I'll walk through some of those steps on how we can change those end conditions. So new corridor, I'm going to select my westbound alignment, select my proposed profile, and then I'm just going to keep the same name but change the prefix to COR for corridor. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to apply it to the whole thing. So I'm just going to lock to start and lock to end. I'll keep the drop interval at 5, and then go in and select my correct template that I want to use. So Spear westbound. And then I'll just continue to click through everything. There, that is now created. So again, this is a very basic corridor. It's just a pavement section with the curb and gutters on both sides. So I'll also go ahead. I do have some horizontal point controls that I want to use. I use them for the shoulder or the edge of pavement because in this particular design, the lane widths are narrower at the ends to tie into existing, and then through these reverse curves, the lane widths widen out to 15 feet each, and then narrow back in again across the bridges, which that's another thing to note. Just for simplicity today, I just have a single template running through here, but in reality, the bridges we have bridges over I-25. Those could be either a separate template drop or what I had done. I'll switch back. You can see I have a bridge modeled in there. So I actually did a separate bridge corridor. And then for my DDI travel lanes for eastbound and westbound, I just continued that same template drop through the bridge limits, just like I'm showing here. But then I end up doing a corridor clipping at the bridge limits. So it's right there. And it basically masks that section. So then the bridge ends up fitting in there kind of like a puzzle piece to fill in the gap. Back to the point controls. So I want my edge of pavement to match these purple lines that I've already created. So I called them westbound left shoulder and westbound right shoulder. So I'm going to go into the corridor objects and add point control. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and lock to start and lock to end. And I'm going to call this left shoulder. And I'll show you in my template. I'll hop in there in a second, but the point that I want to reference that line will be the left shoulder. And then this will only be a horizontal point control constraint and from linear geometry. And then plan element, this is that point control line that I had already created. So I had named that PC for point control, westbound left shoulder. And then I keep the horizontal offsets at 0. So my edge of pavement will be right on that line. And now you can kind of see that left edge of pavement shoulder now follows that line. And I'm going to do the same thing really quick for the right shoulder. So the point I want to be associated with that point control now is the right shoulder. And plan element PC westbound right shoulder. And there you go. So now I'm happy with my edge of pavement limits. So another thing then that I'll want to add is a multi-use path through this center portion here, and then landscaping that ties to the opposite side to the eastbound corridor that I already created. So that's where some of my switches will come in handy. So here's my westbound template that I just dropped. This is what my section looks like right now. I've already created most of the switches, but I'm going to go ahead and just delete my no point switch for the multi-use path, and I'll recreate it. So what just showed up, so all of these components are no longer associated with that switch, which was currently turned off. So now if I were to close out of this and reprocess my corridor, this multi-use path and barrier will show up along the entire corridor for that westbound corridor that I just created. So to create that switch, to keep it turned off and then only turn it on when I want it, I'm going to add a new component and have it be a null point. And I'll name that null point left multi-use path. And you can set up switches in many different ways. The way I did these ones, all of these switches, these null points floating above the template, they're all set to be 1 foot above the center line. And you could really reference any point, or you could have them be horizontal constraints, but just the way I set up this one, they're based on vertical. So I'm going to go ahead and set the vertical constraint and in reference to the center line and 1. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that there for now. So I've got a null point created. Now I need to create a display rule. So right now this null point doesn't do anything without a display rule. So to get there, I selected any of my components, edit the display rules, and then I want to go in and add a new one. So I'm going to call this left multi-use path. And again, this is based on vertical differences. So it's going to compare the vertical difference between 2 points. I want to have the null point be the first point, and then it already has center line selected for me. And so the default value, I made this vertical difference from the center line is 1. I'm going to say make this rule so that this point activates when the value is greater or equal to 2. So there it popped in here. And in order to apply this new rule to the template, which is this barrier that I'm in, it needs to be selected down here and then select rule. And now you can see it here. It's been added to that component. And what that does now that I've added the rule, so you can see all those components went away. If I now change this value from 1 to 2, they all show up again. That's because this component is turned on because this null point is now a value of 2 above the center line. And you might have also noticed when I turned this null point switch on and off, the barrier disappeared and reappeared, and so did this whole multi-use path. That is because I have the parent component set to this barrier. So any rule that this barrier is referencing or looking to, any components that have this barrier as a parent component, they will do the same rule as it. So I don't have to apply the rule to each component that I want to follow this left multi-use path switch. And with that also, I've got this curb and gutter that's always going to be in my template unless I have a way to turn it off. So this, if I turn this back on, you'll see the curb and gutter stays there when I bring the barrier back in, but I don't want that curb and gutter there anymore if I switch it to the barrier and multi-use path. So we're kind of going to do the opposite of what we just did when we are in our rule editor. So I already created the rule, so I have my rule right here, but instead of just selecting and applying it to the component, I'm going to say not that rule. So I've already got a rule applied to this, so I'm going to say and not, and then my new multi-use path rule. And that means that when this multi-use path rule is activated, when that vertical value is greater than 2, this curb and gutter will not be displayed. So nothing happened to that curb and gutter this time because my rule is turned off. But if I turn that back on, you can see my barrier appeared, but my curb and gutter disappeared. So I'm going to turn that off again and exit out of my template and go back in. Oh, the last step to this, I almost forgot. And so after this, I'm going to close out of the templates, and then we're going to be able to go into the corridor editor. And this is where we'll then use a parametric constraint to be able to edit this value from our corridor, but you can't do that if you don't have a label. So I like to label these V for vertical, and then I'll say left MUP equals 2. So when I see the list of labels, when I'm going to be editing my corridor here in a second, this equals 2 reminds me that I need to set this vertical value to 2 in order to turn that rule on. So that should be good now. I'm going to close out. And resynchronize my templates. And nothing should have changed. Again, none of my rules are activated yet, but I'm going to go back into the corridor objects bucket and go to parametric constraint. Let's see. So I'm going to add a new parametric constraint. And if I scroll in, here's my V left MUP equals 2. And now, earlier I was doing lock to start, lock to end, but this time I just want to select a station range in the middle between these two crossover intersections. I'm just going to do kind of near the end for this. So that's my start, and then end station. Okay, so then we've got the parameter start value. It says 1 because that's the default value that I entered. This is where I want to now change that to 2. And then same with the stop value. And there, that multi-use path now popped in there. And now we're going to look a little bit more at some other point controls now, because I want my multi-use path. It's a separated multi-use path. It has a 10-foot buffer towards the ends, and then tapers down to a much smaller, like a 1.5-foot buffer across the bridges to minimize the bridge widths. And then it widens back out to a 10-foot buffer again. So we're going to use horizontal point control again. So our front of MUP or multi-use path is following this green point control that I previously created. So I'm going to hop back in my template first really quick, just to confirm the point that I want to apply that point control to. So I called it left MUP front. So I'm going to go back into my point controls. I'm just going to go ahead and call this left MUP front. And for the station ranges, this point control will only apply where the multi-use path is turned on. So technically I could do lock to start and lock to end, and it'll continue to follow that point control through the middle, and it just won't do anything outside of those limits. So I'm just going to go ahead and click in these intersections for now, just so I know I have my full limits. So the point that I want to do it to was left MUP front. And the line, the geometry I'm using for my point control is called PC MUP. And again, this is only a horizontal point control. So you can see that multi-use path widen now. We've got that buffer starting or ending at that point control line, and then we still have the full multi-use path width extending beyond that. And I want to do one more point control now with this multi-use path. I've got a little landscaping segment or component on the end here. And so I want to use a point control to connect this point, the eastbound back of curb. And I'm going to attach that or create a point control from the other corridor I have for the eastbound direction. And I'm going to connect this to the back of curb to that corridor. So this will be dynamic. This will be a horizontal and vertical point control. And if I made any vertical changes to the eastbound corridor, this point will continue to follow it and be attached to it. Okay, so I'm gonna create another point control. I'm just gonna call this eastbound back of curb. So that point was that one from the template. And so this is where the mode we want to change from horizontal to now both. And then control type, instead of being linear geometry, this will be a corridor feature. And then it'll have me select the corridor. This eastbound corridor is the only one that I have in here. So that's the one I want to target. And then reference feature. So this will be the template point from the eastbound corridor that I now want to connect that point to. So that one is the right curb back top. And again, it'll ask for any horizontal or vertical offsets. We'll just keep those at 0 for this. But I'll go ahead. Make sure I get my full station ranges in there. So now you can see that I need to push back the stations a little bit, but you can see that connects to that eastbound corridor. Check this out in so pretty high level. This is a pretty simple model, but this is the the westbound section that I just added, the westbound template and corridor. So here's that multi-use path, and then it's got the landscaping going all the way over to the eastbound back of curb. Does anybody have any questions on that? I can go through a similar process for these medians as well, if you would like. And one more thing, I guess, to note that I missed earlier, similar to the bridges that I mentioned, that we would clip, do a corridor clipping, and then I have a separate corridor for the bridges. You can see the eastbound and the westbound corridors overlap at these crossover intersections. So those, they get pretty complicated, so those would actually be trimmed as well. And then there would be a bit more detailed hand grading to smooth all of that out. But today I'm focusing on the point controls and more of the parametric constraints. But just, that's definitely something that is done further in design. Just not something we have time for today. But any questions with what I've done so far?
Mitch?
Yeah. Do you guys have a kind of a best practice or a plan to manage and keep all this information straight as you're laying your project out, right? So you probably need to identify all your corridors that you're going to have. A lot of the point naming and stuff is pretty standardized, but how do you guys approach like keeping all this organized and managed when you're laying a project out for the first time? Is it just inherent? Is it just built into your template libraries and that's it?
Are you talking like with the null point switches and that process being standardized?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like if someone else were to jump into here, a lot of the stuff is clearly labeled, like I said, in the template, but how are you planning out how your corridors are going to be named and labeled and organized and stuff before you jump into design? What's your guys' best practice for doing that? Because I don't really know if we have anything on our end.
Yeah, there's no super clear best practice yet. That's definitely something we're working toward. But yeah, I try to make it, we try to make it as clear as possible, kind of what the rules are that's going on, but it's definitely a good idea to like have a document that in the event that someone else takes over your model or something, everything's listed on the naming conventions, how the rules work. Definitely a good idea to just have all that listed out so someone else can take over if they need to, because otherwise models can definitely get pretty messy if it's kind of the same person working in there and wanting to avoid any confusion and keep things as clear as possible.
Yeah, I can add one thing to that and remind everyone, Mitch, this is a great question. In the past, we had like a QA/QC and quality assurance. We ask everyone to explain the template. There will be a page explaining what the template they're using, what the points, what they're doing, what the name of those points, and attached into the ITL library for their copy when they copy it over to work on. That's information serves the project team. Like you said, if someone want to take over, they will go to that document and look at every template point. What does that mean? And what's been added and what's been worked on. That was something we always encourage in previous training, past training, and we'll continue here to remind everyone about that. This is very important to document your template point and what you're doing. So we will continue to do that, and we'll add it, show you how to add it to the template.
And one thing, Mitch, too, again, kind of more, this is kind of just that awareness and informational, is for that digital delivery plan. I know it's further down in the agenda, but this is a place where we would keep track of that information of what the alignment names are, the template that was used, the corridor that's attached to, what the stationing is, and then location and those types of things. Excuse me. And in here is where you could also have a picture of your template that shows what those names are, what your switches are doing. Really kind of add some information to that. One of the things that we'll also be providing, excuse me again, in the manual also are going to be some of these already template name graphics that we've put together that will help identify what those are, and then that also can go into your if it's a design notebook that you have that you're collecting all your information, you can put all of that information in there.
Yeah, this should not replace the document though for PM or roadway designer choosing the template, why and what the name and stuff. This can be in addition, just to make sure.
It's additional,
Yep.
yeah, additional documentation.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
I'll let you take the screen back, Katie, if you want.
Oh. I didn't. She took it away.
I did.
Jeremy, is this a question from Mitch, from Michael?
Yeah, Michael.
Hey there. Just kind of like a broad question. You don't have to like go in and demo it or anything, but let's say between those two divergent diamond bridges, you wanted the end conditions to come down to like a 1 to 4 and then meet in the middle. Would in the template, don't you have to have those like those components that are grading not be end conditions in order for them to be able to like seek each other out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you'd be like grading a ditch versus
Yeah, exactly.
needing existing ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
or,
could.
or I guess, I mean, maybe not necessarily like existing ground, but like if you wanted them to like kind of meet at a 4 to 1 in the middle kind of deal.
Yeah, so I'll share again. yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying. You could do something. You would probably add a component, not an end condition.
Yeah, that was kind of my question. So like end conditions, you can't really like manipulate as much and make them.
Yeah.
Okay.